Marcus Williams was completely unaware he had just inherited a $51 billion real estate empire the same morning his wife and her family kicked him out of their house. While his belongings were being thrown onto the lawn in front of the entire neighborhood, a FedEx envelope was arriving with documents that would prove he owned every single building his wife's family used to humiliate him, including the office where her brother worked, the strip mall where her mother ran her boutique, and the 47-story headquarters tower his wife's company had just moved into. For 10 years, they treated him like he was worthless. For 10 years, they reminded him he owned nothing while they owned everything. What they didn't know was that he'd been standing on $51 billion worth of ground the entire time, and the moment they threw him out, he discovered he could pull that ground right out from under them. How does a man who just lost everything discover he controls the one thing that will destroy everyone who destroyed him? But before we get into that, if you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from today. I love seeing where this community stretches across the world. Your support keeps these stories coming, and I genuinely appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to engage. Now let me take you back to where this all started, to a Tuesday morning in Sherman Oaks, when a property maintenance supervisor sat on a curb watching his entire life get thrown away, completely unaware that in his passenger seat sat an envelope that would change everything. Marcus Williams sat on the curb outside the Sherman Oaks townhouse, his shoulders hunched forward, watching his wife and her mother turn his entire life into a sidewalk spectacle. The Tuesday morning sun beat down on the driveway, making the asphalt shimmer with heat, but Marcus felt cold inside. Vanessa stood in the doorway wearing her crisp white blouse and navy slacks, the outfit she always wore when she wanted to look professional and in control. Her mother Diane was right beside her, gripping a black trash bag stuffed with Marcus's clothes. They were laughing. Actually laughing. Marcus had asked one question 3 days ago. Just one. After 8 years of depositing his entire paycheck from the hospital into their joint account, after 8 years of paying the mortgage on time every single month, after 8 years of fixing the leaky faucet and patching the drywall and keeping the lawn trimmed, he had asked Vanessa if they could add his name to the house deed. That was it. That was his crime. Vanessa had stared at him like he had suggested burning the place down. Her voice had gone ice cold. "This is my house, Marcus, my investment. Why would I add your name to my asset?" He had tried to explain. He just wanted some security. Some proof that the home he maintained, the mortgage he paid, the life he built, actually belonged to him too. She had called her mother immediately. Now here he was, sitting on the concrete, watching Diane heave another bag onto the growing pile. A pair of work boots tumbled out and rolled into the street. His wedding photo in the wooden frame Vanessa's father Bernard had given them landed face down on the grass. Neighbors were watching from their windows. Mr. Chen across the street. The Robinsons 2 doors down. Miss Patricia, who always waved at Marcus when he mowed the lawn. They were all seeing this. Vanessa stepped off the porch, her heels clicking against the walkway. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. "You know what financial abuse looks like? It looks like a man who questions every dollar his wife spends. It looks like a man who demands access to accounts that don't belong to him. It looks like a man who thinks 8 years of basic maintenance gives him ownership rights." The words hit Marcus like slaps. Financial abuse. She was calling him abusive for asking to see where his paychecks went. Diane nodded vigorously, her silver earrings swinging. "Baby, you are finally free of this dead weight, finally!" Dead weight. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could he say? That he had worked 16-hour days to cover the mortgage when Vanessa was between jobs? That he had never once complained about the Mercedes she leased, the country club membership, the designer handbags? A black BMW pulled up to the curb, and Marcus's stomach sank further. Kendrick. Vanessa's younger brother stepped out wearing a fitted grey suit, sunglasses perched on his nose. He was 34 and worked as a commercial real estate leasing agent, and he never let Marcus forget it. Kendrick surveyed the scene with a smirk. He walked over to Marcus, hands in his pockets, and looked down like Marcus was something stuck to his shoe. "Real men build assets, Marcus. Real men don't make excuses." Kendrick's voice was loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You've been living in my sister's house for almost a decade, and you still don't understand how equity works. That's embarrassing." Marcus said nothing. He had learned years ago that arguing with Kendrick only made things worse. A FedEx truck turned onto the street, slowing as it approached the house. The driver, a young woman with her hair pulled back, checked her tablet and called out, "Delivery for Marcus Williams?" Marcus stood slowly, his knees stiff. He walked over and signed the digital pad without really looking at it. The driver handed him a thick manila envelope, the kind that held important documents. It was heavy in his hands. Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Even the mail knows you don't live here anymore." The neighbors who were watching laughed. Actual laughter, like this was some kind of entertainment. Marcus looked down at the envelope. The return address said Whitmore and Associates, and across the top in red letters it read, "Urgent Re-Estate of Eugene Marcus Williams, Eugene Williams." The name pulled at something distant in Marcus's memory. His father's older brother, Uncle Eugene, the quiet man who had disappeared when Marcus was just a kid, sometime in the early 80s. His father had mentioned him a few times over the years, said Eugene had gone off to deal with some buildings and never came back to the family. Marcus remembered going to a funeral 3 months ago, a small service. Eugene had died alone in some apartment downtown, no wife, no kids. Marcus had sat in the back row, barely remembering the man's face. He tucked the envelope under his arm and started loading his belongings into his 1998 Civic. Trash bags full of clothes, a box of books, his toolbox, the framed certificate from the hospital recognizing his 15 years of service. Diane emerged from the house, carrying one last box. She walked right up to the curb and dropped it at Marcus's feet. "Good riddance to Broke," she said, brushing her hands together like she had just taken out the trash. Marcus loaded the final box into his back seat. The car sagged under the weight of everything he owned. He didn't look back at the house, didn't look at Vanessa or Diane or Kendrick. He just got in, started the engine that coughed twice before catching, and pulled away from the curb. In his rearview mirror, he saw Vanessa pull out her phone and angle it toward the house, smiling wide. She was probably posting to Instagram already. Something about new chapters and knowing her worth. The envelope from Whitmore and Associates sat on the passenger seat, still unopened. Marcus had more immediate problems. He needed to find a place to sleep tonight. He needed to figure out how he was going to afford first and last month's rent on an efficiency apartment on a maintenance supervisor's salary. He pulled into the Motel 6 parking lot off the highway and checked in with the last of his emergency cash. Room 114. The carpet was stained and the air conditioning unit rattled, but it had a bed and a door that locked. Marcus sat on the edge of the mattress, surrounded by trash bags, and stared at the envelope. He should open it. It said urgent, but he was so tired, tired of being humiliated, tired of being called dead weight, tired of fighting for dignity in a marriage that had been draining it from him for a decade. He set the envelope on the nightstand and lay back on the thin pillow. What Marcus did not know, could not have known, was that inside that envelope were documents proving he had inherited $51.3 billion in real estate assets that very morning. He did not know that Vanessa's entire world, her mother's business, her brother's career, all of it ran on properties he now controlled. He did not know that the ground they had been standing on while they threw him out belonged to him. Not yet. To understand how Marcus Williams ended up sitting in a Motel 6 with his entire life stuffed into trash bags, you have to go back 10 years, back to when he still believed love could be enough. They met at New Hope Baptist Church's Young Professionals Mixer in the spring of 2014. Marcus was 38, working as a maintenance supervisor at Regional Medical Center. Vanessa was 36, a marketing coordinator at a growing firm downtown with ambitions that filled every conversation. She wore a cream dress that day, her hair straightened and pulled back, gold earrings catching the light from the fellowship hall windows. Marcus thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. They talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. She laughed at his jokes. He listened to her dreams about climbing the corporate ladder, about building something that mattered. When he walked her to her car, she kissed him on the cheek and told him to call her. He called her the next day. 3 months later, he met her family at Sunday dinner. Diane Pearson sat at the head of the table in her Brentwood home, a woman who wore her status like armor. She owned a boutique called La Belle Vie in some upscale strip mall and never let anyone forget it. Her husband, Bernard, a retired postal supervisor, sat quiet at the other end, nodding along to whatever his wife said. Diane looked Marcus up and down like she was appraising furniture. "So, Marcus, what is it you do?" "I'm a maintenance supervisor at Regional Medical. Been there 15 years. "Maintenance." She said it like the word tasted bad. "And what exactly does that pay?" Vanessa touched her mother's arm. "Mama, please." "I'm just asking what he brings to the table, baby. That's a reasonable question." Marcus kept his voice steady. "I make enough to live comfortably. I'm good at what I do." Diane smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I'm sure you are." Vanessa's brother Kendrick showed up halfway through dinner, 34 years old and wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. He worked as a commercial real estate leasing agent and made sure everyone knew it within the first 5 minutes. "You know what separates wealth from poverty, Marcus?" Kendrick did not wait for an answer. "Equity. Building assets. Too many people work their whole lives and never own anything. That's the trap." Marcus nodded politely and said nothing. Bernard finally spoke up, his voice tired. "The boy's got a steady job. That's something." It was the closest thing to a defense Marcus would ever get from him. They got married in June 2015. Diane insisted on paying for the wedding, which meant she got to decide everything from the flowers to the guest list. She reminded Marcus of her generosity at least once a week during the planning. The honeymoon was supposed to be 2 weeks in Jamaica, but Vanessa cut it short after 5 days because she needed to get back to work. A promotion was coming, she said. She could not afford to be away. Marcus understood, or at least he tried to. The first year, Marcus suggested they open a joint bank account. Something simple, where they could manage their money together. Vanessa shook her head immediately. "It's better if the account stays in my name only, for credit reasons." "Credit reasons?" "Trust me, Marcus, I know how this works. You just deposit your check and I'll handle the rest." So, that is what he did. Every 2 weeks, his entire paycheck went into an account with Vanessa's name on it. She gave him $200 a week for gas and lunch. The rest, she said, went toward building their future. He never saw the statements. In their second year together, Diane bought them the townhouse in Sherman Oaks. She presented the keys at a family dinner like she was handing over the crown jewels. "This is my gift to you, baby," she told Vanessa, not looking at Marcus. "An investment in your future." The deed had one name on it, Vanessa Pearson. Marcus paid the mortgage every month. He fixed the leaky faucet in the master bathroom. He patched the drywall when Vanessa accidentally backed into the garage. He kept the lawn green and the gutters clean. But the house was never his. When Vanessa got promoted to senior marketing manager in 2017, she celebrated by leasing a Mercedes and joining the country club her mother belonged to. Marcus was still driving his 1998 Civic with 240,000 miles on it, the one that coughed every time he started the engine. He did not complain. He never complained. In 2018, 6 years into the marriage, Marcus finally worked up the nerve to ask the question that had been sitting in his chest like a stone. "Vanessa, do you think we could add my name to the house deed?" "I've been paying the mortgage for 3 years now, and I just thought..." "This is my house, Marcus." Her voice went cold. "My mother gave it to me. It's my investment. Why would I add your name to my asset?" Kendrick was visiting that weekend. He overheard the conversation from the living room and walked into the kitchen, shaking his head. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, Marcus. This is why renters stay poor and landlords build wealth. You don't understand the fundamentals of equity." Marcus stood there in his own kitchen, in the house he maintained, and said nothing. By 2024, the pattern was carved into stone. Marcus worked double shifts at the hospital, 16-hour days that left his back aching and his hands calloused. Every paycheck went into Vanessa's account. Every request for transparency was met with irritation or outright refusal. Every family gathering became another opportunity for Diane to remind him what he lacked, and for Kendrick to lecture him about financial literacy. When Vanessa brought colleagues home, she introduced Marcus the same way every time. "This is my husband. He fixes things." The guests would smile politely and then turn back to Vanessa to talk about campaigns and clients and quarterly projections. Marcus would disappear into the garage or the backyard, making himself invisible. It was easier that way. 10 years, a decade of being diminished one small cut at a time, a decade of being told he was not enough, did not earn enough, did not understand enough, did not deserve enough. A decade of watching Vanessa and her family build their lives on a foundation of contempt for the man who quietly paid for all of it. And through it all, Marcus endured, because he believed that patience was a virtue, because he believed that love could survive anything, because he believed that if he just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved himself enough, they would finally see his worth. He was wrong. The humiliation Marcus experienced on that Tuesday morning, being thrown out onto the lawn like garbage, was not a sudden explosion. It was the inevitable conclusion of 10 years of systematic erosion. Vanessa and her family had spent a decade teaching Marcus exactly where he belonged. What they did not know was that belonging had nothing to do with deeds or bank accounts or country club memberships. And they were about to learn that lesson the hardest way possible. The final 6 months before Marcus's eviction were not a sudden descent into cruelty. They were the culmination of a decade's worth of contempt, finally expressing itself without restraint. October 2023 brought Vanessa's biggest promotion yet. Elevation Marketing Group was expanding into 3 new markets, and Vanessa was named Senior Marketing Manager with a salary of $140,000 a year. She celebrated by hosting a dinner party at the townhouse, inviting her new colleagues to show off the home Marcus maintained but did not own. Marcus spent the afternoon cleaning, cooking pot roast the way his grandmother had taught him, setting the table with the good china Diane had given them. When the guests arrived, Vanessa greeted them at the door in a black cocktail dress, her perfume filling the entryway. She led them on a tour of the house, gesturing to the crown molding Marcus had installed, the hardwood floors he had refinished. One of her colleagues, a woman named Jessica, asked who had done such beautiful work. Vanessa smiled. "Oh, that's my husband. He fixes things." She said it like he was the landscaper, like he was staff. The guests laughed politely and moved on to discussing quarterly projections and client retention strategies. Marcus served dinner and then disappeared into the garage, listening to gospel radio while they ate the food he had prepared in the house he had no claim to. November brought Kendrick's biggest sale. He closed a $4 million strip mall deal and collected a $120,000 commission. He bought a boat the next week, a sleek white vessel he named Equity. The hospital where Marcus worked was hosting its annual charity fundraiser at the marina. Marcus was there in his maintenance supervisor uniform, helping set up tables and chairs for the event. He was carrying a stack of folding chairs when he saw the boat pull into the dock. Kendrick stepped off wearing boat shoes and aviator sunglasses, waving to the crowd like he was somebody important. He spotted Marcus immediately and walked over, his smile sharp. "Marcus, perfect timing. Come check out what success looks like." Marcus's co-workers gathered around as Kendrick gave them the full tour. He pointed out every expensive feature, mentioned the price of everything twice, and then delivered his closing line loud enough for everyone to hear. This is what success looks like when you understand assets, when you build equity instead of just trading time for money. Marcus stood there holding the folding chairs, his co-workers looking at him with something between pity and embarrassment. He said nothing. He never said anything. December came with the company Christmas party at the country club. Vanessa told Marcus not to come. "It's for professionals, Marcus. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway." He stayed home that night, watching a basketball game he did not care about. Around midnight, he made the mistake of checking Instagram. There was Vanessa in a gold dress, standing next to a man named Darren who worked in her department. He drove a Porsche. The photo showed them laughing, his arm around her waist, both of them holding champagne glasses. The caption said, "Celebrating success with people who understand the grind." Marcus turned off his phone and went to bed. January 2024 marked the beginning of the end. Marcus noticed the mortgage statement on the kitchen counter, 2 months past due, despite him depositing every paycheck like clockwork. He asked Vanessa if he could see the bank statements for their joint account, just to understand where the money was going. She looked at him like he had asked to see classified government documents. "Absolutely not. That account is in my name, Marcus. You don't get to interrogate me about my financial decisions. I just want to understand why the mortgage is behind when I've been..." This conversation is over. But it was not over, not for Marcus. He started keeping copies of his deposit slips, started writing down dates and amounts. He was not planning anything. He just needed to see it on paper, needed proof that he was not crazy. February brought Diane and Bernard's 35th wedding anniversary party at the banquet hall of their church. 200 people attended. The Pearsons had invited everyone who mattered, everyone who could see how successful their family had become. Marcus made the mistake of asking Vanessa one more time about the mortgage during dinner. He kept his voice low, tried to be discreet. He just wanted to know why 2 months of payments had disappeared when he had deposited over $12,000. Diane overheard. She stood up from the head table, her voice cutting through the dinner conversation like a siren. "Excuse me, everyone. I need to address something." The room went quiet. "My daughter is dealing with financial abuse in her marriage. Her husband is standing here at my anniversary celebration, interrogating her about money, questioning her decisions, trying to control her." The entire banquet hall stared, 200 people watching Marcus become the villain in a story he did not recognize. Kendrick appeared at his side, gripping his arm, pulling him toward the exit. "You're embarrassing her, Marcus. You're embarrassing all of us. Real men provide. They don't interrogate. They don't question. They trust." Marcus left the party early. Vanessa stayed until midnight, accepting sympathy from guests who told her how brave she was. March arrived with an ultimatum. Vanessa sat Marcus down at the kitchen table and delivered it without emotion. "You have 2 choices. Stop questioning my finances, stop asking about the house, stop making me explain myself, or leave." Marcus looked at his wife of 9 years. "I just want to be treated like a partner, Vanessa. I just want my name on the house I've been paying for." "After 8 years, I think that's fair." She stood up. "Then you've made your choice." She called her mother that night. Diane called a locksmith. They changed the locks while Marcus was on his overnight shift at the hospital, working a double because Vanessa said they needed the money. When Marcus came home Tuesday morning at 9:30, his belongings were already in trash bags on the lawn. The neighbors were watching. Diane and Vanessa were laughing. Kendrick pulled up in his BMW to deliver the final lecture about assets and equity and how real men build wealth. And a FedEx truck arrived with an envelope that would change everything. What none of them knew, what they could not have possibly known, was that at that exact moment in a downtown law office, final estate documents were being prepared. Documents that would transfer $51.3 billion in real estate assets to Marcus Williams. Documents that included the strip mall where Diane's boutique operated, the office building where Kendrick's employer leased space, and the 47-story tower where Vanessa's company had just signed a 15-year lease. The ground they were standing on, the buildings that supported their entire lives, already belonged to the man they had just thrown away like garbage. They just did not know it yet. Marcus sat on the edge of the motel bed at 8 o'clock that night, staring at the manila envelope he had been avoiding all day. The trash bags full of his clothes surrounded him like evidence of his failure. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet. The air conditioning unit rattled every 30 seconds. He picked up the envelope. It was heavier than he expected. The return address said Whitmore and Associates in embossed letters. The stamp across the top read Urgent in red ink, followed by R.E. Estate of Eugene Marcus Williams. Eugene Williams, his father's older brother. The man Marcus had barely known, barely remembered. Eugene had disappeared when Marcus was 7 years old, sometime in 1984. His father used to mention him occasionally, always with the same vague explanation. Eugene had gone off to deal with some buildings and never came back to the family. Marcus had gone to the funeral 3 months ago, a small service at a chapel downtown with maybe 15 people in attendance. No wife, no children, just a few elderly people Marcus did not recognize and a lawyer who sat in the back row taking notes. Marcus had sat through the service, signed the guest book, and left without speaking to anyone. Now Eugene was reaching out from beyond the grave. Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a letter on heavy cream-colored stationery, the kind that felt expensive between his fingers. Below that was a thick stack of documents bound with a black clip. The letter was from someone named Sarah Chen, senior partner at Whitmore and Associates. Her words were formal and precise. "Dear Mr. Williams," it began, "we are writing to inform you of a time-sensitive matter regarding the estate of Eugene Marcus Williams, deceased March 15, 2024. As the sole living heir and designated beneficiary, your immediate presence is required to finalize estate transfer proceedings. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to schedule an appointment. Enclosed, you will find a preliminary asset summary for your review." Marcus set the letter aside and picked up the document stack. The first page was titled Estate Summary, Eugene Marcus Williams. The second page made Marcus's hands go numb. Gideon Holdings, LLC, privately held real estate investment company. Established 1984, total portfolio, 1,847 commercial and residential properties across 6 states. Current appraised value, $51.3 billion, $51 billion. Marcus read it again, then a third time. The numbers did not change. The pages that followed listed properties in dense columns. Apex Tower, a 47-story office building in downtown Los Angeles. Riverside Luxury Apartments, a 300-unit residential complex. Westwood Pavilion, a retail and commercial strip mall. The list went on for pages. Office parks, shopping centers, apartment buildings, parking structures, 340 commercial properties, 1,503 residential units. Uncle Eugene had not been dealing with buildings. Uncle Eugene had been building an empire. The final page of the summary contained a single paragraph in bold text. Eugene Marcus Williams died intestate with no spouse and no children. Under California law, his estate passes to his sole living heir, his nephew, Marcus Anthony Williams. Transfer of assets requires signature and identity verification only. No probate necessary due to existing trust structure. Marcus sat there holding $51 billion in his lap. His phone was on the nightstand. He picked it up with shaking hands and dialed the number on the letterhead. A woman answered on the second ring. Whitmore and Associates, Sarah Chen speaking. Marcus's voice came out hoarse. This is Marcus Williams. I received a letter about my uncle's estate. Mr. Williams. Her tone shifted immediately, becoming warmer. Thank you for calling. I've been hoping to hear from you. Can you come to our office tomorrow morning? This is time-sensitive, and we need to begin the transfer process. I don't understand. The letter says $51 billion. That is correct. That can't be right. I assure you, Mr. Williams, every number in that summary has been verified by 3 independent appraisal firms. Your uncle spent 40 years building Gideon Holdings into one of the largest privately held real estate portfolios in the western United States, and as of his death 3 months ago, you became the sole owner. Marcus could not breathe. I'm the owner. Pending your signature and identity verification, yes. Can you be here at 10 tomorrow morning? He agreed. She gave him the address. He wrote it down on the motel notepad with a pen that barely worked. Marcus did not sleep that night. He sat on the bed reading through the property list over and over, trying to make it real. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Vanessa's face as she threw his clothes onto the lawn. Dead weight, good riddance to broke. Wednesday morning, Marcus took the bus downtown wearing the same clothes from the day before. He had not packed a suit. He had not packed anything professional. He showed up to the address Sarah Chen had given him wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that needed ironing. The building was glass and steel, 30 stories of reflected sky. The directory in the lobby listed Whitmore and Associates on floors 28 through 30. Marcus took the elevator up, his reflection staring back at him from the polished doors. He looked exhausted. He looked broke. He looked like a man who had just inherited $51 billion. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. A young woman at the desk smiled at him professionally. Mr. Williams, Miss Chen is expecting you. Right this way. She led him through a corridor lined with offices and conference rooms. Everything was spotless. Everything was expensive. Sarah Chen met him at the end of the hall. She was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed and precise, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a bun. She wore a tailored grey suit and shook his hand with the grip of someone who spent her life making deals. Mr. Williams, thank you for coming so quickly. She led him into a large conference room. The table was mahogany, polished to a mirror shine. One wall was entirely windows looking out over downtown Los Angeles. The other walls were lined with filing cabinets and shelves holding leather binders, each one labeled with property addresses. Sarah gestured to a chair. Marcus sat. She sat across from him and slid a folder across the table. Let's begin with identity verification. She walked him through it methodically. Driver's license, social security card, birth certificate showing his father's name, confirming the family connection to Eugene Marcus Williams. Every document Marcus produced, she photographed and filed. Then she slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was dense with legal language, but the bottom line was simple. By signing below, Marcus Anthony Williams accepts full transfer of all assets, properties and holdings previously owned by Eugene Marcus Williams, deceased. Sarah handed him a pen. Once you sign this, everything transfers to you, every property, every lease agreement, every asset. You become the sole owner and decision-maker for Gideon Holdings. Marcus signed. His hand was steady. That surprised him. Sarah witnessed the signature, dated it, and placed it in a folder. Then she stood and walked to the window, gesturing for Marcus to join her. "Mr. Williams, as of this moment, you control the largest privately held commercial real estate portfolio in the western United States." Marcus looked out at the city below. Somewhere down there, Vanessa was at work. Diane was opening her boutique. Kendrick was closing deals. They had no idea the ground had just shifted beneath their feet. Sarah opened 3 files and set them on the table. "There's something you need to see." Sarah Chen opened 3 manila folders and spread them across the conference table in front of Marcus. Each folder had a property address printed on the tab in neat block letters. "These 3 leases," Sarah said, her voice calm and professional, "represent the foundation of your wife's family's entire world." Marcus stared at the folders. His hands were still shaking from signing the estate transfer documents. Sarah opened the first folder. "Prestige Property Group. They lease a 40,000 square foot office building at 1840 Commerce Boulevard from a Gideon Holdings subsidiary. The building was purchased by your uncle in 1992. Prestige has been a tenant for 18 years. She slid a lease agreement toward Marcus. The numbers were highlighted in yellow. "Current monthly rent, $340,000. That works out to $8.50 per square foot." Sarah's finger moved down the page to another highlighted section. "Market rate for comparable commercial space in that area is currently $22 per square foot. That puts fair market rent at $880,000 per month." Marcus did the math in his head. $540,000 difference every month. "The lease contains a standard rate adjustment clause," Sarah continued. "With 90 days' notice, the landlord can correct the rent to market rate. It's completely legal, standard business practice." "Kendrick works there," Marcus said quietly. "He's their leasing agent." "I'm aware." Sarah opened the second folder. "La Belle Vie Boutique, 1,200 square feet of retail space in Westwood Pavilion. Current monthly rent, $2,800. She turned the folder so Marcus could see a handwritten note, paper-clipped, to the inside cover. The handwriting was rushed, informal. "Per K. Pearson request, family courtesy rate, verbal approval only." "Market rate for that space is $8,500 per month," Sarah said. This note was written by a property manager who no longer works for Gideon Holdings. There's no documentation that this discount was ever authorized by ownership, which means it constitutes a material lease violation. Marcus's mother-in-law's boutique, the place where Diane sold overpriced candles and told everyone who would listen about her success in retail. "What happens if there's a lease violation?" Marcus asked. 30-day eviction notice, standard enforcement. Sarah's tone never changed. She was explaining the weather. She opened the third folder. This one was thicker, the lease agreement running to multiple pages. "Elevation Marketing Group, 12,000 square feet on the 14th floor of Apex Tower. They signed this lease 1 month ago. 15-year term, $1.2 million annually." Sarah flipped to a page marked with a yellow tab. "This lease contains a standard new ownership clause. If the property changes hands, the new owner has 60 days to review all existing leases and decide whether to honor them. If the new owner declines, the lease is terminated with 60-day notice. No penalty, no buyout required." Vanessa's company. The place where she was senior marketing manager. The place where she made $140,000 a year and told people her husband fixed things. Marcus looked up at Sarah. "Her CEO negotiated that lease personally. She told me it was a huge win for the company." "I'm sure he thought so." Sarah closed the folder. "But as of 9 o'clock this morning, when you signed the transfer documents, you became the new owner, which means you have 60 days to decide whether to honor this lease." Marcus sat back in his chair. The magnitude of it was almost too much to process. Sarah folded her hands on the table. Mr. Williams, I want to be very clear about what I'm proposing. Every action I've outlined is standard business practice. Rent adjustments to market rate happen every day. Lease violations are enforced every day. New owners review existing agreements every day. There is nothing illegal, nothing unethical, nothing that would expose you to liability. But it would destroy them, Marcus said. It would impact their financial situations, yes. Marcus thought about Kendrick at the marina, showing off his boat to Marcus's co-workers. This is what success looks like when you understand assets. He thought about Diane at the anniversary party, standing up in front of 200 people to call him financially abusive. He thought about Vanessa introducing him to her colleagues as the help. What happens if I authorize this? Marcus asked. Sarah pulled a legal pad toward her and began writing as she spoke. Prestige Property Group receives notice that their rent is being adjusted to market rate effective in 90 days. That's an increase of $540,000 per month, $6.48 million annually. Most small commercial real estate firms cannot absorb that kind of increase. They'll attempt to renegotiate. When that fails, they'll look for someone to blame. Kendrick? He's their leasing agent. He's responsible for maintaining landlord relationships and monitoring lease terms. If he didn't know the building had changed ownership, if he didn't know a rate adjustment was coming, that's a catastrophic failure. Sarah made another note. La Belle Vie receives an eviction notice for lease violation, 30 days to vacate. Your mother-in-law will call the property management company. They'll explain that new ownership is enforcing all existing lease terms. The unauthorized discount is being terminated. She'll lose the boutique. She'll lose the location. She's free to relocate if she can find another space and afford the rent. Sarah flipped to a new page. Elevation Marketing Group receives notice that Apex Tower has been acquired by new ownership that is declining to honor their recently signed lease. 60-day termination. The CEO will want to know why this happened. He'll want to know why the lease he personally negotiated was cancelled before they even moved in. Vanessa negotiated the building, Marcus said. She was in charge of finding their new headquarters. Then she'll need to explain to her CEO why she chose a building that was in the process of changing ownership, why she didn't perform due diligence, why the company just lost 15 years of locked-in below-market rent. Marcus looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there, Vanessa was probably at lunch with her colleagues. Kendrick was probably closing a deal. Diane was probably rearranging inventory in her boutique. They had no idea what was coming. Sarah set down her pen. I need you to understand something, Mr. Williams. This is your decision. I'm your attorney. I work for you. If you want to leave these leases exactly as they are, we leave them. If you want to adjust some but not others, that's your choice. And if you want to execute standard portfolio optimization and lease enforcement across all Gideon Holdings properties, I'll make it happen. Marcus looked at the 3 folders spread across the table. 3 leases. 3 lives. 3 people who had spent years teaching him exactly how much he was worth. Dead weight. Good riddance to broke. Even the mail knows you don't live here anymore. He picked up Sarah's pen. Execute standard portfolio optimization and lease enforcement across all Gideon Holdings properties, effective immediately. Sarah pulled a single sheet of paper from her briefcase and slid it across the table. It was an authorization form pre-printed with legal language. Marcus signed it. Sarah witnessed the signature, dated it, and placed it in a folder. Then she checked her watch. It's 11:45. I'll begin implementation this afternoon. Notices will go out Friday morning. She stood and walked Marcus to the door. They shook hands. One more thing, Sarah said. Once this begins, there's no stopping it. Are you certain? Marcus thought about sitting on the curb with his belongings in trash bags. He thought about 10 years of humiliation. He thought about being invisible in his own marriage. I'm certain, Sarah nodded. Then I'll call you Monday morning with an update. Marcus took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out onto the street. The city looked exactly the same as it had 2 hours ago, but everything had changed. Sarah Chen made 4 phone calls before Marcus's bus reached the next stop. By Friday morning, the first domino would fall. Friday morning at 9 o'clock, Gerald Prestige opened a certified letter at his desk on the 3rd floor of 1840 Commerce Boulevard. He was 58 years old, the owner of Prestige Property Group, and he had built his commercial real estate firm over 23 years of careful financial management. The letter was from Gideon Holdings, LLC. 2 pages, legal letterhead. He read the first paragraph and his coffee went cold in his hand. Notice of lease rate adjustment. Effective June 1st, 2024. Monthly rent for the premises located at 1840 Commerce Boulevard will be corrected to fair market rate of $880,000 per month. This represents standard market correction as permitted under Section 7.3 of your lease agreement. Gerald did the math. They were currently paying $340,000 a month. The increase was $540,000 every month, $6.48 million a year. He grabbed his phone and called the property management company. The woman who answered was polite and unhelpful. Yes, Mr. Prestige, the building was recently acquired by new ownership. They're implementing standard portfolio optimization across all properties. Your lease allows for market rate adjustments with 90 days' notice. We can't afford this. You're tripling our rent. I understand your concern. However, the current rate is significantly below market value. The new ownership is simply correcting that. Gerald hung up. He pulled his financial records, ran projections. There was no way to absorb this, none. They would have to relocate, break their lease, lose their location, or close entirely. He picked up his phone again and called Kendrick Pearson, his leasing agent, the man whose job was to prevent exactly this kind of disaster. Kendrick answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, Gerald, what's up? How did you let our landlord triple our rent? Silence. What are you talking about? Gideon Holdings, the company that owns our building, they just sent notice that our rent is going from $340,000 to $880,000 a month, effective in 90 days. I didn't know the building was changing hands. That's your job to know. Gerald's voice echoed through his office. You're my leasing agent. You monitor our properties. You maintain landlord relationships. You're supposed to know when ownership changes. Gerald, I can reach out to them. I can negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate. It's in the lease. They can adjust to market rate, and we signed it. This is catastrophic negligence, Kendrick. Let me make some calls. Let me see what I can... Don't bother. You're fired, effective immediately. Clear out your desk by end of day. Gerald hung up. Kendrick sat in his BMW in the parking lot of a coffee shop, staring at his phone. Fired. He had been fired. He called his mother. Diane answered on the 1st ring. Kendrick? What's wrong? I just got fired. His voice cracked. My boss said I let our landlord triple our rent. I didn't even know the building changed ownership. Oh, baby, I'm sure you can fix this. You're good at your job. He fired me, Mama, on the spot, for catastrophic negligence. Diane went quiet. Come by the boutique later. We'll figure this out. Saturday morning, Diane opened her mail at La Belle Vie. Between the bills and the advertising circulars was a certified letter. She opened it standing at the counter, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Eviction notice. Lease violation. 30 days to vacate. She read it twice, then a 3rd time. The letter explained that her current rent of $2,800 per month was an unauthorized discount that had never been approved by ownership. The lease file contained a handwritten note requesting a family courtesy rate, but no formal authorization existed. New ownership was enforcing standard lease terms. Market rate for the space was $8,500 per month. Failure to pay the corrected rate constituted a material breach. She had 30 days. Diane called the property management company with shaking hands. This is Diane Pearson. I just received an eviction notice for my boutique at Westwood Pavilion. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Miss Pearson. The property recently changed ownership. The new owner is enforcing all lease terms as written. The below-market rate you were receiving was never properly authorized." "But I've been here for 8 years. My son arranged this lease." "I understand. However, without proper authorization from ownership, the discount constitutes a lease violation. You have 30 days to either pay the corrected rate or vacate the premises." Diane hung up. She looked around her boutique. 8 years of inventory, 8 years of building a customer base, 8 years of telling people she owned a successful retail business, gone in 30 days. She called Kendrick. He didn't answer. She left a message. "Kendrick, call me. I need your help. The landlord is evicting me from the boutique." He called back an hour later. "I can't help you, Mama. I don't even have a job anymore. I got fired yesterday." Diane sat down on the stool behind her counter and cried. Sunday, she closed the boutique and started packing inventory into boxes. She had no idea where it would go. Monday morning, the CEO of Elevation Marketing Group opened an official notice in his office on the 14th floor of Apex Tower. His name was Richard Chen. He was 52 years old and he had personally negotiated their headquarters lease 1 month ago. 15 years, below market rate, a win for the company. The notice was 2 paragraphs long. New ownership notification. Gideon Holdings LLC has acquired Apex Tower. Pursuant to Section 12.4 of your lease agreement, new ownership declines to honor existing lease terms. 60-day termination notice effective immediately. Richard read it again. Then he stood up and walked down the hall to Vanessa Pearson's office. She was at her desk, reviewing a campaign proposal. She looked up when he walked in. "Richard, hey, what's up? How did you negotiate a lease with a landlord who immediately cancelled it?" Vanessa blinked. "What?" "Apex Tower, the building you selected for our new headquarters. The lease I personally signed 1 month ago. It's been cancelled. New ownership is declining to honor it. We have 60 days to vacate." Vanessa's face went pale. "That's not possible. I did full due diligence. The building was stable. The ownership was—" "Apparently the ownership changed and you didn't know about it, which means you failed to maintain basic awareness of the property status during negotiations. This is catastrophic, Vanessa. We just committed to 15 years. I sold this to the board as a cost-saving win, and now we're homeless in 2 months. I can fix this. I can reach out to the new owner. You're demoted. Effective immediately. Junior account manager. Someone else will handle the commercial real estate portfolio from now on." Richard walked out. Vanessa sat at her desk, her hands trembling. Demoted. From senior marketing manager to junior account manager. In 30 seconds. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Call me. Emergency." She didn't call. By Monday afternoon, all 3 of them had received catastrophic news. Kendrick had been fired. Diane was losing her boutique. Vanessa had been demoted. Their professional lives, their financial security, their carefully constructed status, all of it was crumbling. And none of them had any idea that Marcus Williams existed. None of them knew that the man they threw out like garbage owned every single building their lives depended on. But they were about to find out. Vanessa Pearson arrived at Whitmore & Associates at exactly 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. She was driving the leased Mercedes she was 2 payments behind on, wearing a designer suit she had put on a credit card that was already maxed out. None of that mattered. She had calculated everything. Marcus had no assets. Marcus had no lawyer. Marcus had no fight left in him. She was going to walk into that mediation, dictate her terms, keep her townhouse, and walk out with a clean divorce. Simple, easy, done. The receptionist directed her to a conference room on the 28th floor. Vanessa walked down the hallway with her head high, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She had dressed for victory. She looked like someone who won. She opened the conference room door and froze. Marcus was sitting at the head of the mahogany table. Not at the side, not in the cheap seats, at the head. He was wearing a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly, crisp white shirt, silk tie. He looked calm, rested, put together. Beside him sat a woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and professional. In front of them were stacks of documents spread across the polished surface like evidence at a trial. Vanessa's confidence cracked, just a little, just enough. "What is this?" Her voice came out higher than she intended. The woman beside Marcus stood and extended her hand. "Miss Pearson, I'm Sarah Chen, senior partner at Whitmore & Associates. I represent Mr. Williams in this matter. Please, have a seat." Vanessa sat down slowly. Her eyes stayed on Marcus. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not anger, not hurt. Something else. Something like pity. Sarah slid a document across the table. "This is the asset disclosure required for divorce proceedings in California. Please review it." Vanessa picked it up. Her hands were steady. She was still in control. She scanned the first page. Then she stopped breathing. Assets: Gideon Holdings LLC. Portfolio: 1,847 commercial and residential properties. Appraised value: $51.3 billion. Owner: Marcus Anthony Williams. "This is a mistake," Vanessa said. Her voice was flat. "This has to be a mistake." "It's not," Marcus said. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice was different, calm, measured. Not the voice of the man who had apologized for asking to see bank statements. Not the voice of the man who had sat silent while her family lectured him about building assets. This was the voice of someone who owned things. Sarah folded her hands on the table. "Mr. Williams inherited the Gideon Holdings portfolio from his late uncle, Eugene Marcus Williams, on the same day you initiated his eviction from your residence. The estate transfer was finalized that morning. Everything you're reading is accurate and verified." Vanessa looked up at Marcus. "You're saying you inherited $50 billion the day I kicked you out?" $51.3 billion, Marcus corrected. "But yes." Vanessa laughed. It came out sharp and desperate. "This is insane. You're broke. You're a maintenance supervisor. You drive a 1998 Civic. "I know what I am," Marcus interrupted. His voice was still calm, still measured. "You spent 10 years explaining it to me." He leaned forward slightly. "You spent 10 years explaining why I would never amount to anything. You threw me out of your house because I asked to see where my paychecks were going. You told your mother I was dead weight. You told your friends I was an embarrassment. You introduced me to your colleagues as the help." Vanessa opened her mouth to respond. Nothing came out. Marcus continued. "What you didn't know, what you couldn't have known, was that the morning you put my clothes on the lawn, I inherited 1,847 properties worth $51 billion. He slid a second document across the table. It was a property list. Vanessa recognized the addresses immediately. "Your brother works in a building I own," Marcus said. "Prestige Property Group, 1840 Commerce Boulevard. I'm the landlord who tripled their rent. I'm the reason Kendrick got fired." Vanessa's hands started shaking. "Your mother sells candles in a strip mall I own, Westwood Pavilion. The family courtesy rate she was getting, that was never authorized. I'm the new ownership who evicted her." Vanessa's vision blurred at the edges. "Your company just lost their headquarters because it's in a tower I own, Apex Tower. I'm the new owner who declined to honor your lease. I'm the reason you got demoted." Vanessa stared at the document, at the addresses, at the numbers, at the proof that everything she had built, everything her family had built, had been standing on ground that belonged to the man she threw away like garbage. Her voice cracked. "You did this on purpose. You destroyed my family." "No," Marcus said quietly. "I enforced lease agreements. I corrected below market rates to fair market value. I exercised standard business practices that any property owner has the right to exercise. Your family destroyed themselves by building their lives on property they didn't control and assumptions they never verified." He paused. You spent a decade standing on ground that belonged to me, Vanessa, and you never once looked down. Vanessa's throat closed. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what was happening. Sarah slid a final document across the table. This is the settlement offer. The terms are non-negotiable. Vanessa forced herself to read it. The words swam in front of her eyes. Petitioner receives 0 assets from respondent's inheritance. Petitioner retains sole ownership of residence at current address. All marital debts remain petitioner's sole responsibility. Respondent requests no alimony, no spousal support, no division of community property. Divorce finalized upon signature. At the bottom, one final line, parties agree to 0 future contact. Vanessa looked up at Marcus. You're giving me nothing. I'm giving you exactly what you gave me, Marcus said. The house, your name on the deed, your investment, just like you wanted. I'll fight this. I'll contest the inheritance. You'll lose, Sarah said calmly. The inheritance is ironclad. The estate transfer is complete. You have no legal claim to any assets Mr. Williams acquired before or during your marriage. California law is very clear on this. Vanessa looked at Marcus one more time, searching for something, some sign of the man she had married, the man who had endured, the man who had never fought back. He was gone. In his place sat someone else, someone who owned $51 billion worth of the world, someone who had watched her family destroy themselves and felt nothing. Marcus slid a pen across the table. You get nothing from the inheritance. You keep your townhouse. I keep my dignity. We never speak again. His voice was final, absolute. Sign. Vanessa picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so hard she could barely hold it. She signed her name at the bottom of the settlement agreement. Marcus stood. Sarah gathered the documents. They walked to the door. Vanessa sat alone at the table, staring at the property list in front of her. At the buildings she had walked through without ever wondering who owned them. At the ground she had stood on without ever looking down. Marcus walked out of the conference room and did not look back. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. 6 months later, Kendrick Pearson worked as an assistant manager at a tire shop in Inglewood, making $42,000 a year. He had moved into a studio apartment on the 3rd floor of a building with thin walls and a broken elevator. He had stopped calling his family. There was nothing left to say. Diane's boutique never reopened. She worked part-time at Macy's in the cosmetics department, standing on her feet 8 hours a day, selling products to women who used to be her customers. Her marriage to Bernard was strained. They were downsizing to a condo. The McMansion in Brentwood was being sold to cover debts they could no longer afford. Vanessa was still at Elevation Marketing Group, still a junior account manager, still showing up to an office where everyone knew what had happened. She drove a used Honda Civic now. She had deleted all her social media accounts. She avoided family gatherings, holidays, anywhere she might have to explain how she went from senior marketing manager with a country club membership to this. The 3 of them never spoke, not to each other, not about what happened. Each of them carried their own private shame, their own understanding of how badly they had miscalculated. Marcus Williams did something different with his victory. He established the Eugene Williams Foundation with a $2 billion endowment. The foundation focused on 3 things: housing assistance for working families, workforce development programs, and small business grants in underserved communities. The foundation operated out of a modest office in Mid-City, not Apex Tower. Marcus sold 40% of the Gideon Holdings portfolio to institutional investors and used the proceeds to fund affordable housing initiatives across 6 states. He kept the core properties, the ones that mattered, the ones that could do the most good. He met Simone Durant at a foundation event in October. She was the director of a non-profit that provided job training for formerly incarcerated people. She had a master's degree from Howard University. She was a widow, 40 years old, with 2 children. Her husband had died 3 years earlier in a car accident. She wore her grief quietly, the way someone does when they have learned to keep living anyway. They talked for an hour at that first event. Not about money, not about property, about legacy. About what it meant to build something that outlasted you. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became Sunday mornings at New Hope Baptist, the same church where Marcus had met Vanessa 10 years earlier. But this time was different. Simone's kids sat between them in the pew. Marcus listened to the sermon and felt something he had not felt in a decade. Peace. Marcus rented a modest 2-bedroom condo in the same neighborhood where he grew up. He drove a new Toyota Camry. He wore the same Timex watch he had always worn. When the foundation team asked why he did not live in a penthouse, why he did not take advantage of what he owned, Marcus gave them the same answer every time. My uncle spent 40 years building an empire alone. I'm not interested in empires. I'm interested in community. On a cold morning in December, Marcus stood in an empty lot on the corner of Crenshaw and Exposition. The lot had been vacant for 15 years, a scar in the neighborhood where Marcus had grown up. Behind him stood a small crowd, city council members, foundation staff, Simone and her kids, community members who remembered when this lot had been a corner store, a barbershop, a place where people gathered. Today, they were breaking ground on a 120-unit affordable housing development. It would be called the Eugene Williams Residences. Marcus held the shovel and pushed it into the dirt. The crowd clapped, cameras flashed. A city councilwoman made a speech about investment and opportunity and the power of giving back. Marcus barely heard any of it. He was thinking about his uncle, the quiet man who disappeared to deal with buildings and never came back. The man who built an empire and left it to a nephew he barely knew. Marcus wondered if Eugene had been lonely, if he had spent 40 years accumulating wealth and wishing he had spent that time building something else. Marcus would not make that mistake. He looked at Simone standing in the crowd, her daughter holding her hand. He looked at the empty lot that would become homes for 120 families. He looked at the neighborhood he came from, the place that had shaped him, the ground he was standing on. This was what mattered, not deeds, not titles, not $51 billion in assets. This. True wealth is not what you own, it is what you build for others. The people who spent 10 years teaching Marcus his place never understood that he was standing on solid ground the whole time. They measured worth in deeds and titles and country club memberships and leased luxury cars. Marcus measured it in dignity. And dignity, unlike property, cannot be taken away. It can only be given up. Marcus never gave his up. Not when they threw his clothes on the lawn, not when they called him dead weight, not when they introduced him as the help. He endured because he knew something they did not. Your worth is not determined by what other people think you deserve. It is determined by what you know you are. And Marcus Williams knew exactly who he was. He was a man who inherited $51 billion and chose to live in a 2-bedroom condo, a man who owned Apex Tower and worked out of a modest office in mid-city, a man who could have crushed his enemies and chose instead to let them destroy themselves. He was a man who understood that the highest form of power is knowing when not to use it. Vanessa and her family spent a decade standing on ground that belonged to Marcus. They never looked down, they never wondered who owned the buildings that held up their lives. They assumed that because they could see the surface, they understood the foundation. They were wrong, and now they know it. Every single day, every time Kendrick clocks in at the tire shop, every time Diane stands behind the Macy's counter, every time Vanessa walks past the office that used to be hers, they know. What would you have done in Marcus's position? Would you have taken everything? Would you have let them keep the scraps? Or would you have done exactly what Marcus did, enforced the contracts, let the consequences unfold, and walked away with your dignity intact? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that patience and dignity are more powerful than cruelty and status, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. It helps the algorithm understand that these narratives matter. And subscribe if you have not already, because there are more stories like this, more narratives about hidden strength, more tales of patient vindication, More moments when the overlooked become unmistakable. I will see you in the next one.